In this episode, we speak with Mike Ettling, the CEO of Unit4, a software company that specializes in the professional services, public services, education, and nonprofit sectors. Mike was recognized by the Software Report as a top 50 SaaS CEO of 2023. Unit4's integrated suite of AI-powered ERP solutions built on a robust platform helps elevate businesses, delivering visibility and control over finances, projects, procurement, reporting, forecasting, and payroll. The company has 2,700 colleagues across the globe and serves more than 5,100 customers. Mike is a CEO, investor, builder of world-class teams, champion of diversity and continuous learner, and he's passionate about people. From his first leadership role in the Boy Scouts to executive positions in the tech industry, his career has revolved around elevating, engaging, and enabling people. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the managing partner of GrowthCap and the executive chairman of Market Insight Media. He is the host of Growth Investor, a podcast featuring today's best investors, executives, and founders. In the minutes ahead, we'll uncover insights and strategies for accelerating growth and succeeding in business.
Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
Likewise. Good to be on your show.
Where I'd like to start is your specific career path, because you've done both in terms of founding companies as well as scaling companies and serving as an executive, the chief executive of a very large company, capital backed. But tell us about your journey towards becoming a tech executive.
Yeah. So, I started life out doing accounting as a chartered accountant back in South Africa with what was then called Pete Marwick, which is now KPMG. But I always had a very strong tech bent in terms of, I was involved with implementing clearing systems for the futures exchange. So I was very tech orientated. And when I left KPMG, I left because I had started my own business, which was also built around tech and using tech to do things differently. And that saw me ending up starting two businesses, one which was successful, one which wasn't successful, and then ended up in a little Texas company called EDS. And that was I would say was my school of technology, particularly in the outsourcing days and the heyday of outsourcing. But it also let me segue a little bit more to BPO, to business process outsourcing. And I stayed in BPO. I actually then went to my first private equity gig in more managed services technology. And then I went off to Asia Pacific with Unisys and ran a lot of the BPO business in Asia Pacific and worldwide, and then came back. So one of the things before I go on, which has always been interesting in my career, I've alternated between big corporate and private equity business. And that's worked very well for me because in big corporate, you often learn what good can look like at scale. And in private equity business, you often need to do that. But in private equity, you also learn about running tightly and running efficiently and running effectively in terms of capital utilization, which is not always the case in big corporate. So doing both in an alternating way has been very useful. I then came back into BPO with payroll outsourcing with NGA and a KKR-owned company, and then left that to go to run SuccessFactors at SAP, which was a pretty wild ride in terms of the pace of scaling and at the scale we were and the growth we were doing in the market. After SuccessFactors, I then jumped back into private equity and have been running Unit4 since 2019, now on its second journey with private equity owners after the first owners sold in 21. So in a nutshell, that's me.
You've done a lot. You've seen a lot. One of the things I want to hone in on is the breadth of your experience. You're mentioning both at scale as well as the more capital efficient growth phase. You've also worked globally, and the critical element to having anything work is being good with people and knowing how to work with people in different environments. Tell us about enabling people.
Well, I think one of the things I actually learned very quickly, and I think this has been a key to being successful over the years, so when you leave your own countries, I was born in South Africa, you go abroad, when you recruit people, you have to find a different way to find good people, because your reference points and your pigeonholing system doesn't work anymore. So you get to England, you may have known of Oxford or Cambridge, but you got no clue whether Bath University is better than Manchester University or Liverpool University is better than Southampton. So you can't pigeonhole the way you do when you're in a market where you know, oh, someone from this university's got to be good in the background. So you learn to interview more to try and understand the attributes of the person. What makes them good? What makes them resilient? Are they going to cope with challenges? Are they going to survive? Are they survivors? And you tend to build a way of interviewing which is very different, I think, to the way people interview when they're in a single market. And you apply that to any market. So you're less focused on the CV and the background and the upbringing. You're more focused on the behavior, to use a different expression. And that's worked very well for me. And I think that's key to becoming successful in a global context.
What about this concept of some people can interview very well? You can go through 7, 8 rounds of interviews and they're flying through, but then when they are actually put in the role, they're not as effective. Have you found that you've been able to develop a bulletproof interview process?
So short answer to that is no, my hiring has not been perfect. You make mistakes and then you kind of finesse your approach. I think when you're interviewing the way I described based on behaviors and asking people to talk about behaviors and asking people, like, one of the questions I always ask people is, talk to me about something in your career which you would classify as a mistake and what you've learned from that. And it still surprises me how many people say, I've never had a mistake, which is immediately a red light for me, because we all make mistakes. That's life. No one's perfect, but it's about what you learn from the mistakes and how you grow as an individual, which is really important. And people who are very self-aware can articulate that. And that helps. Those kind of questions really help in the interviewing. But I would still say, depending on the role, doing thorough referencing, and not just the references offered up, but really being able to have a network where you can, this person is connected to this. I can make a call and get an honest view of somebody who cares about me telling me, should I take a risk on that person or not? That's very valuable to build. So one's networks are key in that process. And then doing the rigor of background checking and psychometric testing. And, because I think the thing which is harder to get to in an interview is, how does the person behave under a lot of stress? Because people are very good at describing how they behave under normal circumstances. People are not really good at describing, when there's stress in 360 degrees, some could be coming from personal life, some from work life, etc. What kind of personality do they become?
Mm-hmm.
Really trying to understand that, I think, has also been key. I've always tried to work with assessment companies who can really get to that kind of perspective.
Let's talk about Unit4 and the market it serves. You have over 6,000 customers. Clearly, this is a loved product and solution set. So what is unique about what Unit4 provides to its customers?
Yeah, so the best way to describe is we are ERP for mid-market customers in the services industry. So where the R is a person, not a widget or something being manufactured. That's not where we focus. So we have 3 kind of buckets of functionality all in one platform, which is HR, finance, and project accounting. And that brings together what services companies need, whether it's engineering consulting, whether it's a not-for-profit company trying to trace their projects and grants. And a lot of what makes us unique is all the very integrated, seamless workflow, which happens because it's all in one system. And a mid-market company in our target space should not be buying 3 different systems or 4 different systems and trying to stitch them together, because it's very expensive. And they don't get the efficiency in terms of their people's engagement with the system, because it becomes clunky. Whereas our system offers that very seamless experience inside one platform. And that's our differentiation. That's our market we focus on.
Mm-hmm. And are you primarily in Europe or is this global all over the world?
It's global, but we're primarily in Europe, with the US being a big growth opportunity and growth market for us. And we have our product deployed in about 25 countries currently.
Now, you were acquired by TA Associates, very reputable growth equity firm, private equity firm. Tell us about the value that they've brought to the table aside from financial capital.
Yeah, so we did a sale process. We were owned by Advent, and we ran a process in early 21. And we had 5 very credible, reputable bidders in the final round. And one of the things we were looking for was we were very progressed on our journey to the cloud. We had good executives from previous cloud companies. So we were really looking for an investor who could bring a lot of pattern recognition to the table. If we said, well, what's best in class for churn? They'd be able to give us a 4x4 and show us where we were and others were and guide us on that kind of thing. And we felt TA, because of the quantum, the number of portfolio companies they really had good pattern recognition around everything of becoming a great cloud company. That's why we chose them. And that's the value they've brought. It very much has been a case of what was written on the can, on the tin, is pretty much what we found inside the tin. They have extraordinary pattern recognition, and they have extraordinary capability around when you're trying to focus on how do we improve go-to-market CAC. That's been one of the things they've really excelled at in helping us with the journey of getting CAC towards that sort of one-to-one kind of outcome, which is best in class. And if you ask me what's their superpower in terms of what they bring value to companies with, I'd say it's that how do you build a really CAC efficient go-to-market machine?
And what's your current biggest business challenge?
I think the biggest business challenge we have is the transformation from being an on-premise company to a cloud company is not just about the product. I would say 70% of it is also cultural, because give you examples, the language you use with the customer, how you engage with the customer. You're selling a fit to standard solution. You're not selling a fit the gap solution, which is what you did in the on-premise world. So it's no use just changing the product and the pricing and then expecting your 3,000 people, 2,000 people to automatically talk the new language. So that cultural transformation, and then also how you do services around cloud products, is very different. It's all about fastest time to ROI, get live quickly. It's not about build the perfect solution and customize it. So I would call it the last mile of being a cloud company, cultural services packages, how you do that. That's the challenge we really dealing with at the moment, but have really good plans and good stuff in place to get that done.
And what's the balance? There's always a focus on both new client acquisition as well as retention. What you described sounded like maybe it was more leaning towards retention. How have you been doing as well on the new acquisition front?
Well, it's interesting when you kind of get into this model, which TA has been really good at, around how do you build a CAC efficient go-to-market engine. It helps you throw out the right answer as to what is the balance you got to get right between existing and new logo. Because you've got to keep tracking towards where you want to be on CAC. And obviously existing is cheaper to sell business to than new logo. People say to me, what's the right balance between existing and a new logo? And I say, there isn't a right answer. There's only an answer which is in the context of where do you want to get to with your CAC outcome. So no, we are focused on both in that context. And that secret sauce is what, we really learned from TA over the years.
Now, is there a grand vision for Unit4? What's the kind of thing that you aim for, I guess, in the medium to long term?
Well, when we looked at the business, when I first came in, the first phase up to when we sold it was kind of taking a business that was somewhat bad and taking it to good. So we call it the sort of bad to good journey. And then we sold the business on the premise of needing a partner to take us on a good to great journey. So how do you make this a great SaaS company? And TA has been a really good partner in that context. And now as we look at the next phase, I call it the great to grow phase. So you've got a great business. Now, how do you really accelerate the growth? And how does this become a billion revenue company? And how do you really drive the growth? And that's the next phase of the business.
How would you describe the culture of the organization?
Firstly, this is a 43-year-old company. So it started back in the 80s, early 80s. And it was initially run as a very sort of Dutch entrepreneurial federated company, very caring culture in the business. We've continued to, I would say, professionalize the business, but at the same time been very focused on building really, really good people benefits and people experiences. Wellness days, 3 or 4 wellness days every year where everyone takes off. And I think the tribute, which goes to our HR leader and her team, is that through a lot of transformation, and we've done a lot of transformation in the last 5 years, our engagement scores continue to improve, even when we've had to let people go. And I think that's really a huge tribute to how we've built the culture in the company. And I think the culture is very flat. It's very much get things done. And I think the real benefit we have in our culture is people love the product. When you're running a software company where people love the product, a lot of the job's done.
Mm-hmm. What drives you ultimately? You've done a lot in your career. You've reached a lot of professional milestones. What drives you?
I get a big kick out of being able to build a team and then see that team really fly and be successful. I think that, really, really drives me and motivates me. And then in many ways, I think I'm still sales at heart. I still get a huge kick out of the chase of the deal. And, that's what gets me up in the morning.
Excellent. I've got 2 final questions. The first is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
Well, I guess the person who's had the most profound influence on me was my father for many years in terms of just values and setting goals and understanding, the tough knocks of life and how to deal with it. I would say from who is a leader I really admire at the moment, given my sports passion, it's captain of the Springbok rugby team, CEO Khaleesi. The humility with which he leads is, I think, extraordinary. How he gets people to follow him from this platform of absolute humility.
Fantastic. Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
So I've always been very passionate about wildlife and conservation and protecting wildlife. For many years, I don't have her anymore, but for many years, I adopted a cheetah in South Africa. And the program was all about educating people about cheetahs because they're almost extinct. They're not extinct, but they're at risk. But also providing Anatolian shepherd dogs to farmers in return for farmers agreeing not to shoot cheetahs when they're potentially threatening their herds of sheep. And Anatolian shepherds are fearless of cheetahs, so they'll protect the sheep very effectively. So that was what the program's fundamental thing they were doing. And I supported that for many years and still look at wildlife causes as something really key, because when I go back to the game park or the bush in South Africa, there's a sense of belonging which is significant. And I'd hate to see that all disappear.
Excellent. Well, Mike, I want to thank you again for taking the time to chat with us today. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. It's been great to meet you.